Hello, it's my pleasure to start African seminar again. And the guest of today is Ms. Beryl Okal, who is an MA student in this sustainable development. And this is run by the University Center for Environmental Studies and Sustainable Development. And Beryl Okal will be talking about the influence of COVID-19 on the livelihood of street children on the example of Kisumu County in Kenya. So Beryl, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone. And may I share my screen?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Now it's perfect.
All right, okay. So I will start. The influence of COVID-19 on the livelihood of street children on the example of Kisumu County, Kenya. My name is Beryl Okal from the University of Warsaw, University Research Center on the National on the Environment and Sustainable Development. And I will start with the geography of Kenya. I'm trying to minimize. I will start with the geography of Kenya. Kenya is located in the East African region of Africa. Kenya borders is bordered by the Indian Ocean, Somalia to the east, Ethiopia to the north, and South Sudan and Uganda to the west, and Tanzania to the south. All right, so the focus is Kisumu. As you can see the arrow, Kisumu is located within the Lake Basin region, and the major lake is Lake Victoria, and Kisumu is one of the 47 counties in the Republic of Kenya. Its headquarters is Kisumu City, which is the largest city in Kenya after the capital city Nairobi and the coastal city Mombasa. Administratively, Kisumu is divided into 7 counties. That is Kisumu East, Kisumu West, Kisumu Central, Muhoroni, Nyakach, Nyando, and Seme. So this is basically Kisumu exactly the way it is right now. This is Kisumu town. There is the terminal, the train terminal, and the airport terminal. So Kisumu is actually a regional capital and administrative commercial hub, and the industrial center for the Lake Victoria Basin. It's situated on the Lake Victoria. It's developed due to the strategic location, and an internal port is also, as we can see, the railway terminus. So as we go further, these are the attraction. Kisumu has a number of tourist attractions, as we have the Kisumu Museum, which contains pavilions, aquarium, which exhibits also the snake pit, jewelry within the Nyanza province. And also there is the Kisumu Impala Sanctuary, as you can see, with small wildlife that preserves animals and reptiles. And also we do have the Hippo Point and various hotels, as you can see on the pictures. Kisumu actually has been centered with a lot of protests during this time of democracy. As you can see, Kisumu has informal settlements, and Kisumu's opposition stronghold actually has been associated with less development as far as things have been concerned because of opposition. Not so much the government has been sponsoring development. So this is one of the informal settlements, and exactly this is how it looks like. You can see the dilapidated situations and deplorable situation. So the informal settlement structure of Kisumu with the highest densities, we have Manyata A, we have Manyata B, we have Kaloleni, we have Nyalenda. So about 60% of Kisumu's population lives in the slums, which are located in the urban fringes of the city, in the rural like settings, which function as pool of cheap labor for the rest of the city. So what is the relationship between street children and informal settlements in Kisumu? Adiambo 2018 had conducted a study within one of the slums in Kisumu, which is called Nyalenda, and she actually concluded that the factors leading to increase of street children in Kisumu, with an example of Nyalenda, is poverty, breakdown of families, attraction to the streets, and child abuse. And you can see a picture of a father who's in police custody after he allegedly beat his teenage daughter to death. And apparently he accused the teenage daughter of not actually coming back home on time. So we have pull factors, which include special freedom, financial independence, adventure, city glamour, and street-based friendships or gangs. These can develop over time into strong connections that combine with social stigma and prejudices. As you can see, Kisumu is a tourist attraction, so we have an influx of tourists from all over the world, and Kisumu is also one of the sister cities to so many countries like Great Britain, and so many European countries. So basically we have so many people who come into Kisumu, and sometimes they actually rescue these children. So it attracts them to the city. Push factors, while poverty can be important pathway to the street, the great majority of children who live in economic poverty do not end up in the streets. Meanwhile, while many families or children in the street situations have been identified as fragile, violent, or unstable, or orphaned or abandoned, most families of street-connected children have experienced persistent discrimination, poverty, social exclusion within societies where inequalities are very high. Also, overwhelmed families often struggle to cope up with overcrowding, inadequate housing, and with increased health risk and poor access to basic services. So sometimes street children migrate to the streets because of these conditions. So HIV/AIDS generally in Kisumu, we can see that Kisumu is at number 3 with 16.3%. And basically this is a report from the National AIDS Control Center as of 2018. And we can see 184,718 males and females aged 15 to 24 years living with HIV/AIDS. And the national HIV prevalence of the country is 4.9%. So gender and HIV/AIDS, we do see actually that a group of male as compared to female, the prevalence with a male is 24.06 and the female is 28.98, showing that females actually are more vulnerable to HIV/AIDS. So what is the relationship between HIV/AIDS and street children? So basically, according to Malawi Medical Journal, which is one of the countries in Africa in 2013, street children are a vulnerable group of young people whose lifestyles and exposure to street environments place them at risk of HIV infection and other STIs. Rape and anal sex, unprotected sex with the opposite sex, and survival sex were among the factors increasing their vulnerability. In Kenya, 2016 AIDS Care reveals that households with any reported HIV had 4.2% probability of reporting that a child will live on the street. The probability of reporting a child lives on the street was statistically equal between maternal HIV and paternal HIV households. So the probability of reporting a child living on the street nearly doubles in dual affected households. The attributable fraction of households reporting a child lives on the street due to any reported HIV was at 34.6% in the present sample. This just shows you why these children run to the streets. So the prevalence and correlation of HIV/AIDS among street boys, with an example of Kisumu, we can see the boys, the numbers of the boys is at of age 16 to 18 is at 12.2%. So what is the definition of a street child? The term street child used by the Commission of Human Rights in 1994 was developed in the 1980s to describe any girl or boy for whom the street in the broadest sense of the word, including unoccupied dwellings, wasteland, etc., has become his or her habitual abode and or source of livelihood, and who is inadequately protected, supervised, or directed by responsible adults. Categories of street children in Kenya. We have the children who work and live on the street full-time, living in groups in temporary shelters or dark alleys. We have another category of children who work on the streets by day, but go home to their families in the evenings. We have another category of children who are on the streets occasionally, such as in the evenings, weekends, and during school holidays. And the fourth category is known as street families, children whose parents are also within the streets. The scavengers, or in our local term, chokora, is a child who's easily recognized with their trademarks, such as slang over their back, searching through dustbins, or scavenging the dustbins. In order to survive on the streets, young people often beg, carry luggage, or clean business premises and vehicles. Others earn some money by collecting waste paper bottles and metals for recycling. The statistics of children living or working in the streets is at 250,000 to 300,000 in Kisumu, on Lake Victoria, and Mombasa, and on the coast, who have the largest population of street children. So street children do have health concerns. Experts have raised concerns about health of street children besides lack of shelter and sanitation. They do sniff glue, petrol, or smoke bang. The slang name of this is called marijuana. They use it to escape their poverty, homelessness, or violence and abuse at home. So sniffing glue helps them to eat rotten food for survival or to suppress their hunger, simply because glue is cheaper than food. Some children say they use glue and other drugs to heighten their senses to alert them of possible violence. It facilitates sleeping during cold or numbs their physical or emotional pain. And glue is very accessible. It's usually used by cobblers to repair shoes, and we have cobblers in each and every corner of the county. So what is the global situation of street children? We can look at Russia. Over the last century, Russia has seen dramatic rises in the number of homelessness and unsupervised children as a result of wars, social convulsions like collectivization, but now the ranks are swelling because of the coronavirus pandemic. And there's an indication that shows how severe it has been and how difficult it will be to overcome. So minor children who have no fixed places of address are not under the supervision of parents or other relatives. A group known in Russian as Prichonki have appeared with remarkable and troubling regularity after major conflicts and social upheavals. There are millions of street children after the Russian Civil War. In the USA, the major causes of homelessness for children in the USA includes the nation's high poverty rate, lack of affordable housing across the nation, continuing impacts of the Great Recession, racial disparities, the challenges of single parenting, and the ways in which traumatic experiences, especially domestic violence, precede and prolong homelessness for families. In Manila, Philippines, children in the streets are seen clearly in the streets because of the deplorable situations. They look for a daily living in the streets. You can see here there's the mother who's pregnant and children. So basically in Manila, there are between 250,000 and 1 million children who live in the streets. They're left to fend for themselves. And one thing is certain about Manila is their number has increased considerably in the late years. In Colombia, street children suffer a lot because of poverty. So when the peasants arrive in the cities, they have nowhere to live, so they build shacks for themselves. In the shanty towns here, the very broken violence from which they have fled has broken out is beyond control. Most of this violence is related to drugs and fight for control of drugs trade. Many young people join the bandas, and there's a constant threat battles between them as they fight for supremacy. If we look at Scotland, almost 16,000 children found themselves homeless last year, and a household lost their home every 17 minutes. The new figures from Scottish government has shown. And according to Craig Payton, he says that one child in Scotland is made homeless every 37 minutes, which is acceptable figures of reveal. If we look at Senegal in western side of Africa, these children are called talibés. They are students predominantly between ages of 5 and 15 and usually study Quran with guidance of a teacher called Marabout. So they usually take advantage of these children and send them to the streets to beg for food and money, and they are actually mandated to bring something home every evening, and if they don't, they suffer consequences, probably beating or they're kicked out in the cold. So the genesis of COVID-19 in Kenya. According to the president of Kenya, and I would quote, "My government has been working to monitor the spread of the virus. We have set up necessary containment and treatment protocols across the country." So effective March 2020, The government declared a daily curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., which shall be in effect from the territory of Kenya, with all movement by persons not authorized to do so, not being a medical professional, health worker, critical essential services being prohibited. Social distancing is mandatory, and further guidelines were supposed to be issued by state agencies according to each and every county. Furthermore, closure of bars and nightclubs was continued. So the impact of COVID generally in Kenya, we can see that the Kenya's executive, including the president and the deputy and the ministers, they agreed on a pay cut as confirmed due to cases of COVID-19. There was a ban on imports of secondhand clothing, which is a major industry business sector in Kenya. Horticulture, another one of Kenya's primary resources of foreign currency, was already on the decline due to the global shutdown. You can see our earnings dropped 7% in 2019. The country's heavily indebted carrier, Kenya Airways, suspended all international flights on Wednesday, and all the top managers took a 75% cut, with the CEO making 80% as they navigate the current global crisis. So when it comes to enforcing COVID protocols, Kenya is seen as imposing COVID-19 related restrictions in several counties. So as usual, public gatherings and person meetings, including house parties, sports activities prohibited. Wearing of masks was mandatory. All sports activities not allowed. Employers must allow employees to work at home, and ban, especially on public gatherings, was prohibited. So in Kisumu County, there was drastic measures because people were not adhering to COVID protocols, and I will quote the governor. The governor decided to decongest the Kisumu bus station, which is also one of the major business centers for the county, and Kibuye market, which is one of the busiest and largest market in East Africa, and he decided to shut it down. And as you can see, subsequently, the county commissioner directed all residents to start going home by 2 p.m., which is in contrary to the 7 p.m. enforcement by the president. Or if you don't do that, you risk arrest. So he said earlier that everybody must take responsibility to help contain the pandemic. And the governor is quoted saying, anybody who disobeys the orders will be arrested and charged in court of law under the Public Health Act. An example of enforcement of COVID-19, here we see the police officers decongesting the market. So unfortunately, over 1 million Kenyans lost their jobs and livelihoods under the measures imposed by the government to curb the spread of coronavirus. These measures include lockdowns, curfews, business closures, and travel restrictions. In addition, according to Relief Web, it reported that government restrictions to prevent the spread of COVID-19 continue to impact people's access to informal employment and food. So I'll give you an example of voices of the people. Evans Namwe is a businessman living in Bungoma County, one of the counties where Kenya's government introduced restrictions to combat coronavirus. And Evans says, he witnessed police closing the local market, affecting his business. Today, Friday, was a market day, and police officers dispersed all traders, and it has also affected my business. I have not sold anything, said Ndamwe. So also further, Kenya police has been accused of killings and using excessive force while enforcing COVID-19 curfew. An example is an 18-year-old Ibrahim Onyango who's coming from a dump site in Nairobi where he was collecting plastics for recycling. It was the first night that Kenya implemented a dusk to dawn curfew. His brother Francis Otieno said Ibrahim must have missed the announcement of the curfew because he worked all day at the dump without radio or television. He was going home. It was the first day of the curfew, Saturday, March 29th. Together with his friend, they met cops. It was around 7:30 p.m. and they asked him where he had come from and then started to beat him. In between the beatings, he got a chance to escape. That's how he got to his house. When he got in, he says his sister, Rita, says he was bleeding. One of his ears was hanging. He had deep wounds on his head. Ibrahim died 2 days later, despite treatment at Nairobi Hospital. So we can also see further mistreatment by police during the coronavirus crackdowns. This is an example of Mombasa at the ferry. The police allowing tear gas at the crowd. And at the end of the day, the people who were caught up in the lines going to the ferry were forced to lie down on their stomach. So from my data collection, this is a focus group discussion 1, and it is a group of about 20 boys. And there's a young boy, age 15. The name is withheld. he actually was the voice of the group, expresses himself very well in Swahili on behalf of his group. He indicated that his journey to the streets of Kisumu started when he lost his biological mother. His father remarried, and that's where the rain started to beat him. A promising young man who was also going to school narrated vividly how he suffered in the hands of his tormentor, who is his stepmother. He landed in the streets around 2015, and survival in the streets became very difficult with the announcement and enforcement of COVID-19 protocols. During the curfew hours from 7 p.m., he says that they normally play hide and seek with the police officers, who actually disperse crowds with tear gas while they don't hesitate to beat them up as they clear the streets. He confirmed landing in the hands of the police and spending 24 hours in the cells. A good Samaritan, who they call Mwalimu is teacher, an elderly man who usually comes to town to meet them and teach them. One day he decided to take them to Aga Khan Hospital for testing, and since then they have not seen the man again. So he says that they now hide in tunnels and sewer lines at night. And his father says that we do pick used masks or beg from good Samaritans. The next continuation, he says, look, our bags are empty because businesses have closed. We normally collect bottles, boxes, and trash and proceed to the major dumpster where our collections are weighed for payment. Sometimes business owners pay us to collect trash, but now we are on our own. We only see political leaders during campaigns, but now we are suffering. We hardly hear from them. Everybody is scared of COVID and we are looked down upon. We have been surviving on leftover foods from restaurants, but now they're also closed. We are suffering. The next group, the group speaker is a young boy who identifies his age of 18 years. He was not comfortable mentioning his name. There are around 15 boys and they don't seem very excited about the situation that they have been in and are still in. This is Taifa Park, our bedroom and kitchen, but now we don't sleep here since the police officers want us out of the streets during curfew. Sometimes we get in trouble because we seem to be in gatherings without masks. We have moved to the forest at the shores of Lake Victoria. He indicated that they sleep in the forest infested with crocodiles, snakes, hippos, but it's better to them than to land in the hands of the police. In his group, they're of ages 7, 8, 9, 10, up until 24. And he says some have families within the town, but most of us escaped home due to personal reasons like family issues. We used to get paid for picking up scrap metal, boxes, and bottles at the Kachok dump site. A kilo of box goes for Kenya shillings 5. Sometimes we get 150 Kenya shillings a day or even 100 Kenya shillings. But now with business shut down, we are struggling to make ends meet just to get by. One of us looks like he has malaria, so sometimes we walk to the county hospitals and beg for assistance. Sometimes we go to the chemist and ask for help. We have ladies as part of the group, but they have gone to shower in a small river within Kikomi area. The ladies don't sleep with us. They normally sleep in Juakali area outside a shop called Kambwere since it's safer than here. And you can see this is recent attacks during COVID season. Crocodile eats a fisherman, leaving a leg only to bury. And this is a picture of Kachok dump site where they take the boxes and everything they've collected for weighing and payment. So interview with individual respondents, a male of age 27. In Swahili, he says, tuko na damu ngori, tulipona tu hivyo. In translation, it says, we have very thick blood, we always just heal. And he said, it started off like a cold or pneumonia, then chest pain. So one morning, one of us who was sick woke up dead. After this, one of us walked into Lumumba Sub-County Hospital and begged for checkup. And after pushing for services, his test returned positive of COVID. It is after this incident that the county government officials rounded us up for testing and possible treatment. We no longer have bread since the major market is closed. At the market, we collect food, we take luggage carrying jobs for customers. We moved closer to the slums, closer to the people since the streets ended up being empty with no activities. At least we could always run into locals who would give us coins for food. Besides, we have been forced to find alternative shelter to avoid being in the light of the police officers who raid the streets during curfew. We also move around in groups, so it is really hard to avoid being in groups. And this also attracts attention to the officers. We collect used masks from the streets and wear them to avoid unnecessary confrontation with officers. Sometimes we run into good Samaritans who offer us free masks. We really don't care about used or dirty masks that we collect from the garbage bins or the ground. The amount of glue that we sniff, and he says this while checking, we are tough. Further, there's a respondent who says he comes from a sub-county within Kisumu County, Seme. He has been living in the streets for the past 8 years. He has suffered police brutality, and he narrates that he has been a victim. He has been arrested a couple of times and placed under police custody for defying COVID orders. His current temporary shelter, Taifa Park, was raided and cleared, and he prefers to sleep in the tunnels. Respondent 3 interjects to share his story, and his first name initial is M, and he agreed to mention his Omondi name. I was arrested 3 months after the declaration of 7 p.m. dusk to dawn curfew. He claims that they were from hideout near Agape Children's Home. He ended up injuring his knee severely after falling during police raid. He later spent months without treatment while his health deteriorated until one day Red Cross medical camp came to his aid. It is during this moment that he shared his ordeal with Red Cross authorities. This is a picture showing what has been happening in Kenya during the curfew time. You can see the police are already armed with batons and tear gas, already attacking the crowd, sending them home. So respondent for age is unknown, home is unknown, claims he escaped children's home in Nairobi and found himself in Kisumu through stowaway. He must have boarded a bus and was hiding in the bus. He has been arrested by police officers during curfew hours since he lives in the streets. So when people take off to running to evade the police, he finds himself helpless. Another one, he calls himself Jamogo. Jamogo means maize millman. He's age 33. He's originally from Busia County. He escaped Busia to Kisumu in search of greener pastures. He has been arrested a couple of times by officers for hanging within the streets within curfew hours, yet that's where he lives. Another one is from Kisumu County, age 14. He was abandoned by his relatives who promised to take him and sponsor his education. He has suffered from police brutality during curfew hours. He has been arrested and spent weeks in police cells. His shelter was also raided by police officers and cleared off. A very promising young man, respondent 7, from the streets who got an opportunity to ride a passenger motorcycle called Boda Boda as a part-time job. Weeks into curfew, he was hit by a police officer during 7 p.m. raid. He ended up with an injury in his mouth as well as losing his 2 teeth. He reached out to county government hospital and was treated. He reported the matter as well to the county officials who further referred his case to International Policing Oversight Agency. And respondent number 8 was arrested by officers at the bus stage. He says he spent 5 months in custody with no one to listen to him nor bail him out. The experience in custody was bad, but he says at least those who were arrested would share their meals and drinks, which were usually sneaked into the cells. He believes that the officers got tired of seeing him in the cells and went ahead to release him. And this is just Taifa Park, how it was eventually cleared, so they had nowhere to hide or run. And finally, there's a respondent 10 who gives an account as a runaway child in Kisumu, and he corroborates in his words. Nobody tells us anything, but we hear side talks about the situation of things now. So we do what we see people do. That's why we pick masks that they drop. We usually pick the masks we see by the roadside. We don't go out again like before. All of us sleep and wake up here in the streets, in the tunnels and sewerage. Mostly sometimes they lodge tear gas in the tunnels. We always have hope that people bring food so that we can eat, but nothing comes our way. But God is with us. If COVID sweeps the whole world, then not only us, but all will die. So in conclusion, over the years, child abuse has received global attention. This has led to a serious concern over increasing incidences of physical and sexual abuse, child trafficking, child labor in the worldwide. Whereas the consequences of grievous physical and psychological trauma are well recognized, all forms of abusive injury in various settings are believed to have adverse effects on health, education, physical growth, responsibility, reasoning as human being, style of life, relationship with parents and relatives, leading to runaway children to streets, and finally, fugitives in the world at large in the 21st century. Under such circumstances, the physical, psychological, intellectual, emotional, and cultural orientations of children in terms of healthcare, education, shelter, nutrition, safe living, welfare in terms of meals has become myths to this group of children as the world watches over the situation as it worsens in both developed and developing countries every minute in the 21st century. According to World Bank in 2020, the COVID-19 shock hit the economy hard, disrupting international trade and transport, tourism, and urban services activities in particular. So the purpose of this study is to investigate how thousands of street children of Kenya and other countries suffer severe hardship and violence. Globally, many street children live in fear of the public with respect to political leaders and security personnel who are charged with responsibility to protect them. Onyango et al. In 1991 describes street children as those young boys and girls who dwell on the streets with the purpose of making a living for themselves and their families. There are new phenomena in major urban centers such as Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, and Thika, nor are they unique to Kenya. These children are found in urban areas of all developing countries. Take 2006. The testimonies from children interviewed reveals a common pattern of routine abuse by police, soldiers, and members of the military. These figures of authority approach street children often at night and demand their money or articles of clothing, threatening them with their fists, boots, and batons. A report, according to one 14-year-old boy who sleeps with his friends in empty kiosks near Goma Market in Congo, says we are regularly harassed by the military police. In the evenings, they come to where we are sleeping and take whatever they can from us. We are chased, and if caught, they beat us with their fists or piece of wood. Where in 1998, over 1/3 of children in the United Kingdom grow up in conditions of socioeconomic deprivation. In consequence, they experience poorer health than their more affluent peers. So with this socioeconomically deprived population exist several groups of children and young people who profoundly marginalized, for example, homeless children, those in care, travelers, and refugees. They have both poor health and poor access to services. Interventions require responding to healthcare needs of these groups by the development of appropriate strategies. Further, given the emphasis currently placed on local planning and commissioning of health services, Onyango et al. Argues that in Kenya, the majority of street children move in groups and even save funds through a group leader who makes sure that portions of individual earnings are put together for future use. At times, a group leader is responsible for discipline in the group. According to Maldon, 2004, ethno-political conflict is now considered one of the most important threats to global security. A study on street children schooling in Zimbabwe indicates that over 25% of street children had never been to school. Children of the street were least educated, followed by those who slept at home, and then those who slept both in the streets and at home. That is UNICEF in 2001. So understanding these issues will help inform policies that will protect street children from contemporary political insecurities. Exact information about the nature of children's experiences, in particular during political conflict, is difficult to obtain. The particular problems documenting children's experiences can be attributed to a range of factors. First, violence and social disorganization often militate against such documentation. Second, often the research undertaken reflects researchers' and practitioners' most pressing concerns for children during political conflict. For instance, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in 2001, more than 2 million children have been killed in conflict, with further 6 million wounded and 1 million orphaned. Still, children feel hopeless and helpless. This is according to UNICEF, in a study conducted in Zimbabwe. It argues that they have no option concerning what to do about their lives except to live on the streets. Street children mentioned further that their lives on the streets were tough, fatalistic, and with no future. While all of these suggest intense and severe childhood experiences arise as a result of politically motivated violence, it is more difficult to comment on the exact scale of these problems in particular conflict regions. Nonetheless, theoretical and empirical evidence would suggest that war and political violence is likely to have qualitative distinct impact when experienced during childhood. Over the last 20 years, development psychopathology has become the dominant paradigm in the conceptualization of mental health in both adulthood and childhood. Central to this understanding has been an appreciation of risk presented by adverse environments during childhood. It is for this reason that this study is focusing exclusively on the influence of COVID-19 pandemic on the street children. It is no longer no doubt that street children as a phenomenon of modernization is indeed a social security problem that requires attention in Kenya. Furthermore, its rapid increase calls for an urgent response. However, appropriate response requires sound, basic information. Currently, the information available is inadequate, mainly derived from programs and to a large extent Nairobi focused. Thus, the need for collection of information with a national perspective. Finally, the UN in 2012 affirms that states as the principal duty bearers are accountable for respecting, protecting, and fulfilling children's rights within their territories, while states play the role of the principal duty bearer for all children, including street-connected children. Other non-state entities, professionals, and individuals are also recognized by the Convention on the Rights of the Child as duty bearers in the fulfillment of children's rights. They include parents, families, teachers, doctors and social workers, employers, and or probation officers. States have the obligation as principal duty bearers to ensure that the secondary duty bearers have the knowledge and means to carry out the specific obligations. All children, irrespective of their economic status, race, color, sex, language, religion, national, ethnic, or social origin, property, disability, birth, or any other status have the same rights and are entitled to the same protection by the state. This is according to the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child. And these are my references. And thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really not only interesting, but also quite terrifying what you've said about the situation of street children. And I think it's not only this part of Kenya and not only the case of Kenya, which is even more terrifying. But anyway, thank you very much. I would like to open floor for discussion. So if you have any questions, please ask your question. If there are no questions by now, so I will let myself to ask you a question. I'm very curious if there were any protests or riots or any kind of protest that this situation in Kenya was met by the people living in Kenya. If there was any reaction.
Reaction to COVID enforcement protocols, or
yes, as there were many reactions in Europe, in Australia, in Canada, very strong reactions. If there was something like this, as according to what you've said, that the situation in Kenya was really very bad in terms of how the situation of people was affected by the regulation. So if there were any protests.
Yes, there was actually social media influencers who really took advantage of social media. But I know there was a time that people tried to gather and protest, and they were dispersed by the police officers, because first of all, gathering is illegal according to Public Health Act. So the enforcement was very serious, that nobody was able to even attempt to conduct even a protest, because first of all, the moment you were seen in groups of more than 2, it was already illegal. So it was not possible. And the police officers and the authorities were really on COVID, enforcing COVID protocols. So it was not a question. It was not allowed.
Okay, thank you. But also, please excuse me for maybe naive question, but especially here in Europe, we have this this picture of African cities that they are very crowded. There are many people, not only to mention those living in the streets, but that, you know, like marketplaces and so on. Now people somehow, you know, like live very close one to another. So how did it look like? Were the rules really followed? How did it look like with social distancing, with you know, like from what you've said, I understand that the curfew was very hardly introduced. So so probably it have been successful to much extent. But how was everyday life?
Everyday life was very interesting, because first of all, there was no crowding in bus stations. It was illegal to overcrowd. It was mandated that you maintain social distance. So even the matatus, which are local taxis and local bus transports, were mandated to not carry the normal capacity. So you had to make sure a 14-seater was supposed to carry maximum of 7, including a driver. And if you were found to have violated that, you would your license would be terminated and everything. So even the public transport drivers had to have a COVID certificate to be able, first of all, to operate the matatu. You have to have a sanitizer at the entrance of the matatu. You must wear a mask even to board, even to line up to board the public transport. At the markets, we had specific market days, and further there was mandatory social distancing. And eventually the markets were shut down. Unfortunately, even the supermarkets because people were misbehaving and the numbers would go up. So after that, then everybody sat down, the authorities sat down, and they decided to come up with how to enforce social distancing in the markets, because crowding was obviously in the markets. But the only challenge that we had was in the slum area, where people live in crowded houses. At that point, the only thing that I realized that the police officers were doing is that they were enforcing the curfew and enforcing crowding. If you were found outside in public gathering in a crowd, that was illegal. What you do in your houses was not something that police officers could do. So it was actually, even just sitting in a park, more than 2 people was illegal. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any questions, Professor Łęcka?
Yes, actually, I have few questions, if it is possible. I mean, at least 2. First, I would like to ask you about the, some health situation, because we are talking about some, punishment for the, behavior. But what about the health situation? You mentioned in your interview that street children, they talk about some health problems, but this health problem comes from the police reaction. But how is, actually the health state of the street children? Actually, they are, they have, I'm sure that they have poor health because of lack of food and lack of hygiene on the street. But it is worse, much worse during the COVID-19, because they also got COVID and there is no idea how to help them because no health insurance, etc.
During my interviews, and I have scripts about that, what I learned about them is that most of them say that when COVID happened, they were not eating because now they did not have money to buy food, or they could not make small money to buy anything. So they would sit, they were hungry, so they ended up being maltreated. And sometimes when they got sick, if it was really, really bad or overwhelming, they would approach the organizations within, or they would approach the county hospitals and sit there and force themselves to be attended to. So there was a time that the county, when one of them got sick and one of them died in the streets, the county rounded all of them up for COVID testing. And some of organizations like CITAM, which is a church, was issuing free vaccination for them. But most of them say that normally when they get sick, because they sniff glue is like, it's like a drug. They sniff glue. So even if they get sick, they cough, they get better. But if it's malaria, you cannot get better. So sometimes they walk into the chemists and beg for, because our chemists, usually they have the malaria kits, and sometimes issuing of medicine in Kenya is not really restricted. Like you've got to have a prescription. Sometimes you have a clinical doctor, even in the chemist, who can examine you and give you medication. So my interest was, were you given this medication for free? And he said, yes, sometimes we push for help, and sometimes the little money we've made from our pockets, we approach a health facility and pay 100 shillings and there for help, especially malaria, which when you get sick, you're down and you can't really help it. So the health situation deteriorated, and especially with the lack of food and money. And further, when they're sleeping in, the ones who are sleeping in the forest, they expressed concerns of not having blankets and always playing ping pong, because there's the crocodiles, the snakes, the hippos, sometimes they can hear them. So they were sleep deprived. They never got enough sleep. So they complained so much about their health was not as the way it used to be when everything was normal. So even when it comes to collection of anything that was within, since they moved to the slums to collect things, they didn't have much energy as they had before COVID.
But what about some, aid organization? I mean, national countries organization or international organization, they disappear because of the COVID, or they were working, but it was not enough at the moment?
Because of the COVID scare, initially everybody was struck about COVID, but later on they expressed that Red Cross would, because Red Cross also has an office, they would approach Red Cross. They said about this Mwalimu guy who picked them up and took them to Aga Khan for testing. They said about this church which gave them vaccinations. And then finally, eventually now, the county government started working with other individuals to start to come up with a program to start helping them. But initially, because of the scare, they just mentioned Red Cross and the church, and just want some individuals who take them for COVID testing and things like that. But because of the scare, there was no organization that was going around to pick them up because they were also hiding. But eventually they approached Red Cross. They mentioned Red Cross.
Red Cross. So if my next question is about the religion group. Religions group, they were supportive for a street children at the moment, or I mean, I know that there are several religion group and they could be helpful for a street children, but maybe in this unstable time they are not effective as usually. What is your opinion?
My opinion, because we have Catholic organizations, we have Protestant organizations and other small religious groups, but the thing that they expressed really was Red Cross, which actually came into their help, international policing oversight, and county. They did not mention about Catholic organizations, which I know sometimes usually helps out, but they said for the girls actually were going to girls. It's not easy to see girls, but they normally go to the children's homes like Agape for help. And normally these organizations help the children's homes directly. But the boys don't want to be enclosed in the homes because they want to be free and do these other bad things that they do, and sniff gum and do drugs and things like that. But initially, the only organization they mentioned was Red Cross, and later on, county government.
County government.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, this is last chance.
So if there is a last chance, maybe.
Yes, please go ahead.
Because Beryl, you mentioned about your focus group meetings, and did you talk also with girls, or that was impossible to find them, or they didn't want to talk to you, or what's the problem with girls?
Actually, after my investigation, this is going to be like another opening for my research, because I was interested to know why there were not girls during my interviews. And when I kept asking them, okay, so do you have girls in this group? They said, yes, we do have girls, but now you can't. The other group said, no, you can't see them. And they were laughing and they felt uncomfortable to discuss the topic about girls. Then the other group said, no, they're going to shower in the nearby river, so they will come back later. But even if they come back, you won't see them because they'll go to sleep in another location. And the other one says, if you need to talk to girls, go to the children's home, that's where they stay. So I did not see girls. It was more of boys. And it raised actually my eyebrows to find out if they're saying that they do have girls in their groups, then what is the reason behind not being able to speak to the girls? So even if whether they're abusing these girls and they don't want them to talk to us, or maybe there's something underlying that they don't want us to know, it is a question for me to discover during my next maybe data collection, or maybe research, because I was not able to see any girl.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just a comment from another country. It happens. It happens to me that when I was going to the trash city in Cairo, I found girls, and they like to talk, but later on they told me that okay, but it is really private, because for many reasons they escaped from home. They were Muslim, they are Muslim, so it's better for a family not to know where we are living actually. And I understood that clearly. And then it happens that 1-2 years later, I saw the document movie, French document movie, and they show exactly the same girl which I met 2 years ago, and they made a movie with her as a star. So I am sure that the whole family already knows very well where she is living, because that was also very detailed show that the place where she is living. So it is anything like that in Kenya, that girls, they don't want to show up because maybe the family, the abusive family will beat them, or some.
Even the boys, when it comes to not wanting to be really identified, is the fact that they run away from home. And some of them have also run away from the whole children homes. So they fear that if they identify themselves, you'll pick them up and take them back to their families, or you track the homes where they came from and take them back. So most of them don't want to share much information about them. But as far as girls is concerned, I was not literally able to get a hold of any girl. And I noticed the boys were very, very particular about asking them about girls. They were not comfortable, and they did not want to disclose where we can find the girls. So it was very interesting, because I was asking them, or is there a reason why I can't see them now in the streets? They said, no, now they're busy, they're working, they're making money, whatever. We don't know where they are. And yeah, maybe one day if you find them, you find them. Then I said, okay, I will not take too much time asking about girls. So it's something that's very interesting, that I would like to find out more why I was not able to speak to girls, because most of these street boys are boys. And also, if you look at the nature of the kind of jobs that they do, the boys are the ones actually who are able to do it, like picking up boxes, picking up bottles and carrying them. Mostly the nature of Kisumu is that. And I don't know if the girls work at night, because night activities when it comes to prostitution and things like that. I'm not sure. That's why maybe you cannot see them during the day. Maybe they're asleep. I'm not sure, but I was not able to speak to the girls. And I would not say religion would interfere with the girls and the boys, because we're actually an open country. So I think as far as the girls is concerned, it could be another phenomenon besides just what we see from the face value.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And maybe I can ask you one more question. So what were the limitations for you when you did your research? And I mean mostly limitations connected with COVID regulations, because I can imagine that there were many limitations as for any researcher doing field work, but in this special time when you said that more than 2 persons, it's not allowed, then how did it influence your contacts with those boys?
Actually, it was very interesting. The first limitation was ethical considerations, because you're speaking to people who are very hungry, and your face looks good, and you're putting on nice clothes, and you're smelling good. So the first thing they would ask, who are you? And I would have to explain myself and my intentions, where I'm coming from, and the reason why I feel like talking to them. And they would first say, we are hungry. So why would you want us to speak to you on an empty stomach? Would you be able to buy us lunch? So that was the first limitation, being able to make sure that they were comfortable to be able to speak to me. It was very challenging. Another limitation is the COVID rules. Okay, I have masks, they don't have masks. So it meant that I would have to provide for the masks and ensure there was social distance where we talk. So maybe at the park, you'd ensure. So if it's a group of people, and normally during the group of people, it's so interesting because there's usually a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who's able to speak, but you'd see the bigger ones also. So they would say, okay, fine, so-and-so will be able to speak for us, and we can actually sit very far away from you and be on the lookout. So, and the other limitation is finding them, because they were scattered all over the city. They were no longer in towns, and even if they were in town, since they realized there was no activity in town, so they would move to the slums to beg door to door. So that was the other limitation. It means transport, and just, it was very hectic. And the other limitation was, there's somebody who actually say that we have people who come and talk to us and we don't hear from them again. So what is a guarantee that you will take our concerns and do something about it? So that was the other limitation. And then There was also another limitation when it comes to transport of moving in and out of the city. I remember there was a time when the instruction was issued that there was no moving from Nairobi to Kisumu or Kisumu to Nairobi or Mombasa. There was county shutdown. And I was in Nairobi and I was scheduled to go to Kisumu. So at that time also it prolonged my meeting of these street boys, because now it even made it worse. There was no travel. So that was the other limitation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other question? Have you got any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, first of all, I would like to thank you again and congratulate you on very interesting presentation and also very well presented. So it was really a pleasure to listen to you and also from this completely different perspective of problems connected with COVID situation. So thank you very much for the presentation. And I would like to ask everybody who is interested in the next meeting of the seminar, which will be more or less in a month's time, and it will be 17th of March, and the topic related to Old Congo history. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.